Hello everyone and welcome to Cowls Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. I'm your host, Jake Hart. I'm a podcaster and a writer for Fresh Take Hub, and as always, I'm joined by my fellow co-hosts.
Hi everyone, it's Tom Gapper here, your resident comic book shogun and everyone's favourite ginger nerd. Looking forward to talk about the film which has probably been my most hyped Marvel film for quite some time.
Hello, I'm David Osger. I'm a multimedia journalist and also the guy who has apparently not got it for the last few weeks and months, and finally we'll find out today if I got it.
I'm so excited to find out if he got it.
This whole review is based upon this question, but we'll get into that in a second. So if you haven't guessed by the hints and also by the title of the podcast you're listening to, this is a movie review, a spoiler movie review. Just want to get that out the way, people. We will be going full spoiler territory of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, the next installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, starring Simu Liu as the lead character Shang-Chi, starring Awkwafina as Katie, Michelle Yeoh, Tony Leung, and plenty of other star-studded casts. But we need a guest on for this, and we welcome back to the show a film journalist and writer, Stefanos Florakis. How are you doing, Stefanos?
I'm good. Unfortunately, I'm grieving the loss of a great actor, Michael Kenneth Williams, who died just last night. So even though I'm very glad to talk about this film, fortunately I can't be in full pleasure because I am kind of grieving this really great artist. But yeah, I'll try my best, and most likely while we talk about Tony Leung and how great he is, I'll probably will be a lot better.
Yeah, it's definitely very sad news that has hit the industry recently. He is a fantastic actor, has appeared on many great shows and movies, so we send our condolences to his family and friends. But let's get into the review then. So this is it, as I mentioned, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. We've been anticipating this on the show for months now, ever since that first teaser trailer came out. But before we get into the actual review, as we mentioned up top, I have to ask the question now. I can't remember when the teaser trailer was released, but a good 6 months at least, I would say. Dave, do you get it?
Well, I think the ironic thing is that after seeing this film, I would flip it to you guys and be like, do you get it? Because I think this film purposely went out of its way to address a lot of my problems and concerns. So the fact that the end of this film and so many elements of it were he's an Avenger, he's got powers, look what he's doing. I was just I'm happy with this. So I think the question is, do you guys get it? I think that's what the core of this is.
I mean, I got it.
I get it.
I got it from the first frame of the film to the last.
Yes, Tom, I know you're very excited to talk about this film. You're absolutely gassed about this. But so we'll start with our overall thoughts. And as I mentioned, this is your last chance, people. If you have not seen the film yet, stop this podcast, go see the film, support the cinema, then come back and listen to this podcast. Or if you're a crazy person, carry on listening and we'll spoil it all for you. So we're going to start with our general overall thoughts. So I'll start with our guest. Steph, what did you think? Initial reactions, overall thoughts of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings?
I had an amazing time. And I'm not necessarily talking just the film itself, but I'm talking about the entertainment quality of it. This is probably the most popcorn fun I've had for quite some time. I love the Suicide Squad to death, but I think this is more to what not even we would expect from a late 90s, early 2000s action flick, but the one that we kind of grew up with them. We love watching them every summer night because we had a DVD and most of the times we had rented, so we only have 2 days to watch it over and over again. and that kind of what it brought out of me. Uh, of course, I have many different thoughts as we're gonna be going with through all the details later on. But yeah, overall, this is more or less what I expected, with a bit more. Which again, the more not, it's kind of gonna go both on the positive and a bit on the negative, or it's just more critical. But yeah, this was a great time. I don't even know exactly what my final pudding is on my favorites of the franchise, because it's very different. Even though it kind of does become more MCU film in the end, even that is not the kind of MCU we have seen. So this is and actually this actually really reminds me a lot of more recent Chinese films that try to be American, which is very strange to see now a huge American production trying to be a mega budget Chinese film, which is so bizarre but somehow works. And I'm glad for it. I'm all the way in. And yes, Tony Long, Super Big Daddy.
Absolutely. That's been making the rounds on Twitter, that Disney apparently are getting all the daddies in all their franchises. But yes, overall great thoughts from you, Steph. So, Dave, I go to you. What were your initial reactions coming out the theatre?
Yeah, I think similarly to Steph as well, it was so much about the experience, because also, as you know, as much as I was hyped and loved Suicide Squad, you know, that was very much more like a personal experience of watching something that I was excited for, was very like tailored towards like my tastes, and was like a sort of favorite director of mine. But at the end of the day, at the time I saw that, there was still restrictions in place in terms of social distancing and that kind of stuff at the cinema. So this was a really bizarre experience to me, to be in a packed cinema in which, you know, the group of people I was with, Tom was one of them, was sat next to a stranger, you know, like, and there was a stranger on the other side of, like, Craig was with us as well. So, like, on the other side of Craig was a stranger. In front of me, I could see, you know, heads of people on every row. And every time there was, like, you know, these big jokes and comedic moments, the audience was laughing. Everyone was laughing. There was just this great atmosphere within the cinema. There was so many people waiting to go in, getting snacks and everything like that. And I was watching it and just thinking, wow, you know, the experience is back now. Whether it will stay or not, who knows? So I was kind of cherishing it there, going, okay, if things take a turn again, you know, I've still got this moment, and we might never get moments like this as often again. But, you know, without focusing on the negatives, this film, it was made for that kind of experience. And I'm glad the Marvel stuck to it. And I think the way we've had conversations in the past about, you know, will budgets have to go down, and will films have to sort of shrink down and manage their expectations, you know, I would sort of point to a film like this, definitely, in which you know, as we've mentioned before, you don't want to give diverse projects, like, you know, sideline them. And I think that was so fantastic about this, is that they threw so much at it and went, yeah, we're going to give it, like, not even just, in some ways, not even to the degree of, like, Black Panther, which had some huge set pieces, but were some of them very safe. Whereas this one, they went, yeah, we're going to have this giant, like, construction tower fight scene. We're going to have this huge, like, bus scene. And then at the end, it's going to turn completely fantasy crazy, which we'll go into, which I thought was, yeah, just bonkers. So I was really happy with it. I thought it was one of the funniest MCU films we've had in a long time, which genuinely did make me laugh. I know that will come up later on, and I think I do share some of the opinions there. But I think it was just, for me, it was not so much the kind of, like, eye roll worthy MCU humor of, like, you know, like, typical MCU humor. I felt that the performances and the actors within this film saved that a lot, and they brought so much to it that I think it elevated it, and it didn't just make it that kind of, like, typical cheesy humor. So yeah, you know, I think that this is probably, as I've mentioned to you guys as well, probably one of my favorite, like, collective MCU casts, along with Black Panther as well. Just an absolutely outstanding cast, and I think I said on Letterboxd as well, I couldn't just pick one performance and say this is the person who stood out to me. I thought that they were all amazing, really brought their A game. And yeah, I think that for a film and a character that I originally was like, I hope this does well, I really want it to do well, but I just had that fear of what had happened with projects like Mulan, in which Disney or Marvel would drop the ball and kind of in going, oh, well, we're doing this kind of representation, so that's good enough. Like, no, they've, like Black Panther, they fully embraced like all the elements of this, and like Steph said, really represented kind of like Chinese, Hong Kong cinema, and yeah, it was a blast. So some definite problems, but overall, a fantastic time at the movies.
Yeah, we'll get into the details of the problems a bit later, I'm sure. But another glowing review from you, David. Tom, how about yourself? I know you came out of this film absolutely loving it. I know we didn't see it together, but you were straight on the group chat being like, this is my favorite film.
Yeah, I mean, like on the one hand, I'm cut. Like,
and it was that voice as well. When it finished, Tom actually turned to me and went, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, I went full Palpatine. But yeah, I mean, like, I was thinking, like, oh, it's a good thing we're doing the review like a few days after I've gone to see it, because, if I'd come out and done this review straight away, I would have been gushing about it, calling it like the best comic book movie ever. I've had a few days to sit and think about it, and I can confidently say that it is definitely within my top 3 favorite comic book movies ever. I absolutely fucking loved this film from start to finish. It was just, everything was great. Like, the acting was great, the action was just superb. It's some of the best action I've ever, like, I was literally sat there thinking to myself, and some people are probably going to hear this and like want to lynch me, but I was sat here watching the fighting and just thinking, wow, Daredevil's got nothing on this shit. I'm just saying it right now, that it was fantastic, and I definitely want to see more of this corner of the universe and more of Shang-Chi in his own movies, in the Avengers, just in everything. Put him in everything. It was just phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. I got very emotional at several times during the film. I remember thinking initially as well, there was too much of a certain character that we'll go into. But now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I say that, but I laughed every single time. Like, at all the jokes he made, I kept laughing, and I loved his presence there and thought it was really cool. So honestly, like, I'm trying, like, I maybe have a couple of small little issues, but, like, I don't have any real criticisms for the film. I think that, for me, anyway, it's about as perfect as a comic book film can be, because it really felt like a comic book movie. Like, as much as Suicide Squad felt like a John Ostrander comic, like, come to life, this just was just pure comic book amazingness, just right down to the final act. Because at the end of, like, I know some people may complain about the final act, but for me, in Marvel, Kung Fu has always been heavily steeped in mysticism, so I kind of saw all the, like, crazy fantasy shit at the end coming, in a way. So yeah, I had an absolutely wonderful time. It was great seeing the cinema so packed, even though I had to wait so long for my goddamn popcorn. I missed, like, half the Dune trailer. I was very sad. But yeah, it was just wonderful, just being in a packed room. And, like, Dave says there was a stranger next to me. There was actually an empty seat next to me where the stranger had put their, like, nachos and stuff there. So I actually had a plate of nachos next to me. But me and those nachos enjoyed that movie so much.
They were next to you originally, and then they moved. So, yeah, you are correct there.
So, yeah, I love this film. It's got my stamp of approval, and I want more. I want more Shang-Chi right now. Give me the sequel right now. Jake, do it. You have the power.
Hey, man. Hey, I have no power. That is up to Mr. Feige. And you know what? After seeing this film, and definitely after the wonderful performance it's done at the box office, we are absolutely getting a sequel to Shang-Chi, and definitely, spawning a new franchise, a new corner of the MCU. For people who may not like the film, I'm sorry, this is going to be a boring review for you, but I also love this film as well. I thought, to start with, like, the cinematic experience first, similar thoughts to Dave. It was such a pleasant sight to see pretty much a packed house in the screening I was. Like, apart from, like, those horrible seats right up against the screen, every other seat was pretty much taken. And there was something about it, and I didn't really get that feeling when I was watching Black Widow, but there was something about the packed house, the fact that everyone, is chatting. You could feel the excitement within the screening. And then as soon as, that the title card comes up with, like, the rating and stuff, everybody everybody was silent, and you just felt like, okay, we're all in this together. The MCU is truly back. Cinemas are truly back, I think. It's not quite the experience I had with Black Widow. It was a good screening, but it just had a different vibe to it. Do you know what I mean? And it was also because it was such a new, fresh experience for the MCU that no one in that audience knew what they were about to witness. With Black Widow, we had an idea, but this is such a fresh direction. And the film itself, it's a hell of an experience, man. That's what the movie is. Like, I also think, like, to the MCU's credit, as we don't give them enough credit, when you're 28 projects now, I think it is, into a franchise, and you're still able to produce this kind of origin story, and I would argue probably a more polished origin story than we've seen previously in the MCU. That is obviously can be argued. It's a wonderful story that celebrates this Chinese and Asian culture so powerfully, but at the same time, I thought they made it really accessible for a new audience to enter into this world, but still respecting the traditions of the culture. Thought it was incredible. The action sequences, that was the main thing for me going into this film, being such a huge fan of martial arts films starring, the great Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and all the other greats. I was really intrigued to see how they would do these fights. Are they going to actually do these fights? Are they going to honor Hong Kong cinema, martial arts movies like it should be, not the cheap American quick-cut editing action that we see a lot of? But no, man, their fights just jaw-dropping, like incredible. We'll get into the details and stuff for that. And I have to say, I've got to give credit as well to the director, Destin Daniel Cretton, because how we managed to get all the fight sequences to work. It was shot really well. Like the imagery and cinematography, it was so beautifully done. And to also have this really powerful story about family and about what choice in the world and stuff like that. I've got to give it to him, man. He had a hell of a job to do. And he, for the most part, I think, knocked it out the park. Do I think the latter half of the film is not as strong as the first half? Yes, I do have some issues with some pacing and certain characters. We'll get into that. But overall, this is such a fun film. I absolutely love it. I'm still deciding where it fits in my MCU ranking, but I would definitely say it's within the top 10 of the MCU. But yeah.
You walked in my shadow. I trained you. So the most dangerous people in the world couldn't kill you. Son, it's time for you to take your place by my side. You better watch out, 'cause it's my time. It's all mine. That's not going to happen. It's a new era, yes, I come alive.
Let's get into like the actual story then of it. So Steph, I'll start with you. Like, what did you think of the how they told this story and the plot, and were there any themes that came out to you? And also, most importantly as well, because the cultural impact of this film, as we've already mentioned, it representing the Asian community and Chinese and Hong Kong cinema. Me, Dave, and Tom, we don't come from that background, but obviously you do. So you have a different take on it. So what was it like for you and how this culture was portrayed?
So the film begins with the fanfare, the whole typical MCU thingy. And they're like, oh, dope, it's there, all that. And then from the black frame, it goes to the actual opening of the film, and then suddenly I see subtitles and I hear Mandarin, and I said, literally out loud, everyone heard me saying, "Oh, thank you, finally." And from that point on, I was in. For that point, I'm like, there you go. You just did it. That's the thing. You don't need to do much to actually be important to a culture, from just have the fucking culture in it. Jesus Christ. Like, the language is such a vital part to everything that if you actually include it, there you go. You did 90% of the work. Yeah, like after that, it's a small things that, well, like an Asian director or actor, you will let you know and be like, oh yeah, can we add this so we can make it more real for the Asian audience, you know? And they were like all over the place. Like specific details is Katie's family, like the whole setup from the very beginning when Sean goes into the house and removes the shoes. We didn't need to focus on that. He just did it really quickly, and he just went in. That's another very small thing that every Asian family does. Like hell, I do this, and every time I go to any one of my friends' houses, I always ask them, shoes in or out, like whichever. All the time they just look at me like, no, just keep your shoes. Why the fuck? No, and I'm like, well, like prefer the other way, but fuck it. Uh, that kind of stuff, and also Katie's grandmother, which is more or less a very traditional Asian grandma, and of course the typical thing of asking Sean, "Where are you gonna marry Katie?" Like that is another thing. Like so many things all over the place. Also, karaoke bars. We need more of those here in the UK. Why we don't have more here in the UK? We need them. Like, and hopefully this will spark a movement for people to ask them to be here because holy shit, there's so much fun. But yeah, they like, as you can tell, in the matter of representation, yes, like 10 out of 10, like all in. And even when it goes to the fantastical things, the creatures, like I'm like, oh, I remember seeing you in a storybook or something. I could have some small flashes from different anime or Chinese films I watched as a kid, and I'm like, oh, this is the thingy, yeah, like no head, yeah. I couldn't remember the name, but I was like, oh yeah, that weird fuck. And it was, and yeah, so all that just was great, and especially if you are Asian or grew up with Asians, because I did watch it with one of my close friends who like they did live in Korea, even though they were English, and and she immediately understood everything, that how the characters were, the personalities, and the relationships with each other from just basically how they talk to each other and how they behave, and literally to how they keep silent. Like the relationship between Wan-Wu and his children, that is actually something very close to how Asian strict fathers are with their kids. So all that's just, I'm not going to go on because I think the whole podcast will be just that. So yeah, I give my approval. And now as for the plot, um, it's quite simple. It does not think is anything like not unique, but I'm like not something that I didn't expect. What I didn't expect was the themes of family, but to a far more three-dimensional way. That this is not just two characters with mommy and daddy issues. I mean, they have mommy and daddy issues, but they're not clear. They're not easy to understand, and even in the end, there's not a complete closure to it. It's just literally the whole film is about three people who are grieving a family member and learn to move on. And even moving on, it's not beautiful or great or even cathartic, but it is something, and that is something I didn't expect. But yeah, basically, I love the duality of Sean kind of in the end become using both what he learned from his mother and father, and this is what he becomes basically the Avenger Sean. Like that's, I think that got me. And overall, also we could talk later. I really liked all the characters. I think that's what won me over, and especially when they used the themes to the characters. Very similarly to how David said about Black Panther. I think that's what kind of makes an ensemble strong when the ensemble itself able to act on the themes of the overall film, and I think that kind of made the whole group far more dynamic and strong together. But yeah, but as for the story itself, I don't want to say it's typical MCU, but even though it follows the same beats, but like I said before, it kind of more reminded me of an action flick than an MCU film. But yeah, that's what I would say about this.
Tom, I'll go to you next then. So, what did you think of like the story, the plot, and there any like particular themes that shone out for you? I know we'll be keep on talking about the theme of family for sure.
Yeah, I did love how they tackle the theme of family, just because when I initially heard that they were going for that, it did like harken back to when James Gunn was saying the same thing about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And he was like, this is a much smaller film and it's all about family, but I didn't actually get that vibe that much from it. As much as I loved the film, the whole thing between Peter and his father sometimes rung a bit hollow for me and just didn't land. The stuff with Shang and his father did land with me. It was just so heartbreaking in a lot of ways, just like hearing about Shang's upbringing, just like seeing about how he worked through that. And what I really loved as well is how like quite often in the film they didn't actually like have Shang work through his problems by like talking it through with someone. It was either done through like the training sequence with his auntie, which I absolutely loved. That I felt like within that training sequence there were so many things that like they didn't like speak them, but they were there. And it just like, I don't know, like I got a lot out of that scene. And just like as well the moments towards the end when Tony Lewan's character gives his last look at Shang and like fires the rings back at it. Again, so much being said in that scene without them actually having to utter a word. And ultimately just like through just Shang working through his problems by talking and by punching, he does come through in the end, a better person, finally realizing he is both his father and his mother, but he's also ultimately his own person as well. He is Shang-Chi, master of Kung Fu. As well, again, little moments like when he finally tells Katie, they're like, yeah, I did actually kill that guy. And then he's like, I'm going to have to kill my father. When I was watching that in the cinema, I found myself sat there like looking at Katie, or Awkwafina's character, and just being like, say something to him, damn it. Say something to him. Just speak to him. You're his best friend. But ultimately, I was like, I actually like that she didn't say anything, because in fairness, what can you say to something like that when your best friend tells you something like that? But also, it reinforced the whole thing of while Shang has this great support system and people helping him out, ultimately, he works through his issues himself. And then also, like, his sister had a great arc in the film as well. To me, she was almost like a co-lead character. You could have called it, like, Shang-Chi and Jiling, Legend of the Ten Rings. I also loved, like, her little helper buddy. I can't remember what his name in the film was, but he's played by, like, what's his name? Ronnie Chieng. I loved him just because as soon as I heard his voice, I was just like, right, I've recently been watching Scissor 7 on Netflix, and I know that you are 7. So I just loved that I finally got to put a face to a name, but also I just loved him in the film. He was just this really great, just cheeky character, and I'm glad he's probably going to be sticking around as well based on that post-credit scene. But yeah, I think Zhengling had a great arc. She knows how to wield a fucking rope dart really well. Really well. She really put the training in for that. Yeah, even though the story beats, it wasn't anything like brand spanking new. Like I wasn't there going like, this is a story that's never been done before. But I think just the way it was done was just really great, from all the quiet moments to the intense action. And then at the end, okay, maybe some people can argue it got a little bit contrived with the whole soul dweller killer thing blasting out, and then a huge fight between two dragons, but also it was a huge fight between two dragons with Shang-Chi doing some amazing kung fu hustle with his fucking rings. I mean, it was just pure cape shit, and I absolutely loved it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the story and the themes and all that.
Nice.
10 out of 10.
I mean, I do agree with what both of you guys are saying, and it is a very simple story, I would say, in a lot of regards, but I think it's all in the execution what differs it from a lot of the other MCU movies. I think it's more that it's not trying to be groundbreaking in any way, but it's just trying to do something fresh within the MCU. Particularly thing that stood out for me was how the use of flashbacks. Because with a lot of origin stories, you sort of have their origin in like the first half hour of the film or so. You get all the back lore and all of that sort of stuff. But I liked how they was used in this film, that throughout different points in the film, we're like, okay, we're going to take a moment now to go back to this moment because it's important for what's about to come up. But it's not just also focusing it from the point of view of Shang. It's looking at it from, okay, well, this is from Wenwu's perspective. This is from Zhai Ling's perspective. You know what I mean? I just love that they kept on doing that. It's just interesting and fresh. And it's not, like I said, I've seen this in films before, but not within the MCU, which that's why, if you want to keep comic book movies going, you have to try things like this, even if they've been done in films before, maybe just not in superhero films, you could say. But yeah, other than that, I just thought it was incredibly, tight. That first act, my God, arguably my favorite first act of the MCU. It just flew by. The pacing was relentless, man. Like going from big set piece to big set piece as well. Like I couldn't believe how much they crammed within the first half, but it also didn't feel overstuffed. It was all fluid, going from the origins, Wenwu's origin story, to then the bus fight, to then the abomination, ring thing, and then to the scaffolding fight. And this was all in the space of like 40 minutes or 45 minutes. I'm like, wow, so much has gone in. And I was thinking, like, I've seen all this in the trailers, more or less. I have no idea what the rest of this film is going to entail. And I see a lot of people say, oh, I can kind of guess how this film is going to go. You don't. It really caught me off by surprise of how they told this story, what they did with certain characters. Yeah, that was the main thing that caught up for me with how this story was told narratively. And obviously, I'm always going to be a sucker for a theme of family. I just thought it was done, again, differently to how they've done it before. Like, I think within, like, the Guardians films, it's there, but it's sort of... It's a dysfunctional family in a way because it's not really their family. It's all these collection of rogues, you could say. And with Black Panther, there's a family story there, but I feel as if that film was more about the nation of Wakanda rather than the family between, the T'Challa and his siblings and stuff like that. This felt like, no, this is a family drama, as Steph, said beautifully, about them grieving about a family member and all trying to grow out of that, and all doing it in very different ways as well. So, and the fact that they all managed to come together at the end, really well done. We'll get into, the ending and stuff like that in a second. But Dave, what did you think of, like, the story, the plot, and how this, any themes that stood out for you?
Yeah, I think you guys have sort of like touched on a lot of definitely the strengths and the elements I was going to talk about. I think that in terms of themes, yeah, I think legacy is a big part of Black Panther in terms of when you're talking about the family elements. There are more about like that generational aspect and about the mistakes of his father, etc. And this almost is, yes, about family legacy, but on a different side. It's more with Black Panther of like, oh, I've got this like great father to live up to, who've done these amazing things, and then realize that he did something that maybe he doesn't quite agree with, and he has to sort of fix everything. This is kind of on the flip side of being like, oh, I know my dad is like a bad guy, and I now need to like step up and actually do something about it for once. So I thought that worked really well, and like you said, the mother being very much at the core of that. I think that for me, in terms of that was where I'm not sure if I totally agree with a lot of people say about like the pacing so much, because I think that the third act is the most troublesome. But for me, it was just where some things weren't quite connecting, or like they weren't quite connecting all the dots together. There was a few little holes within the script in which I was like, you could have mentioned that a bit earlier, or you could have said that again just to clarify these things. But like you said, Jake, I think that this was such a fast pace and they had so much to tell, because again, Black Panther had the benefit of being like establishing somewhat of the universe within Civil War, even if you wanted to say Avengers Age of Ultron to a degree. So I think with this film, it had a lot to do in that it's not even like Doctor Strange or anything, which is like, oh, we're going into the, the magic world. Everyone knows magic, mystic, wizards, whatever. This is like introducing something which is in many ways like altogether different, which people don't know about, kind of thing, which is like, oh, it's this kind of like martial arts fantasy world, which is not quite magic and it's not quite space. So it's something wholly unique. So they have a lot to do in that sense. But for me, I think the theme of like the father-son stuff just didn't quite land at the end, just because it came so much of like a father relentless to try and find his wife kind of thing. It kind of got lost within all the action and everything. And I think for me, something that could have fixed that is if they made him more of a Luke and Vader kind of fight, and more of a battle of emotions and more of a fist fight. I think that the Ten Rings actually do make things a bit too power heavy, and like you lost some of the martial arts there, which I thought was unfortunate. So yeah, I think that the themes are very strong, but it just means that they start off so strong that you saw like they lose their way a bit towards the end. However, in terms of actually like bonds between characters, I think that's for me where the biggest strengths lie. I think that the theme of friendship I absolutely loved. I think Steph has like touched on this on his like Letterboxd review as well. The fact that like this film starts with like, oh, we're just friends, and at the end they're still friends, like Katie and Shang. I think that was fantastic. Some people have said, oh, will they get together in the sequel? Blah 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 blah. I don't care. This film is still like stayed true to that, which I think is great, especially for an actress like Awkwafina, in which that is kind of like her bag. She is like the buddy, the Robin Williams type character. So I felt that it would be disingenuous to make her the kind of like love interest, and that was one of my concerns going in. So I thought that theme was really strong, and it added to the humor. I also loved that theme, as Tom touched on as well, with Shang and his sister Zhai Ling. And one of my favorite moments in the film, and this is where I kind of got scared, was that moment where she was like on the dragon, and she was trying to be taken by the demon sucking monster, etc. And she was like, let me go. And we've seen that so many times throughout film, like this trope. And I was like, if you fridge this character, you have just nuked this film. Like, that will be really bad. And the fact that he went like, I'm not doing that again, I was like, yes. Like, that's literally, this film is not only has Simi Leo like called out Marvel in the past on Twitter being like, hey, hire somebody like me. It was almost as if he was also looking to the camera and like putting the middle finger to like Hollywood in the past of fridging these great female characters and saying, no, I'm not doing that. So I thought that was fantastic. So that worked really well. And just that idea of empowerment as well. Some people might come out at the back of this and say like, oh, they're changing up the sex of a character, a famous villain, etc., etc. I haven't seen that yet, but again, I don't tend to go to those corners of the internet. But I think that it's just refreshing that, again, it's not so much an element of like, oh, hey, now this character is like a female villain. Isn't that great? It's just the fact that it fitted so well within the story, that idea of legacy and what the characters want to do with their lives, so that run really well throughout the film. The fact that you've got Shang throughout it is kind of like, I just want to kind of get rid of this burden from myself, and I kind of want to do something special, but not in the shadow of my father. And the fact that she, on the flip side, was kind of like, I want to better my father, and I want to like build on what he has done in my own way, which, again, spoilers for like the end credit scene, but that's what made that end credit scene so good. Yeah, those themes of like empowerment, of like character bonds and stuff, I thought worked really well. And yeah, as for the story, like I said, kudos for them for fitting so much within, like you said, Jake, a tight time frame. I think it's just that as they get towards the end, there has to be a lot of like lore dumping and a lot of like, and now here's the story of like how this all happened. And then they kind of like just immediately have to go, right, the backstory and everything now. You have to immediately like jump on board with this. And there's this dragon in the ocean. There's this soul sucking monster up there. And yeah, we're going for it. And you were like, oh, okay. And where that kind of like disconnected for me was where the father came to burn the city as he wanted to, and they went, you're being seduced by the creature that's in that cave. And it's like, he's never heard about this creature before. Like, this is the first time he's been told it. It's like the first time many of the characters there had been told about it. He kind of just wades in straight away. I didn't feel that they had built that up enough within the plot, so I felt that that's why the film is so front heavy, and I think that's why it is so excusable as this film. We've all given it a glowing review, but I think mainly because it's so good in those first two acts that it doesn't fall apart by any means. It's just then the cracks start to appear towards maybe the end, or where they could have just, polished off some certain elements. But on the whole, very strong, as you guys said, because you have so much emotion. That scene also when Katie and Shang are like sat there at the sort of ocean side, beautiful stuff.
I think a lot of that, like the visual elements of it, all like it's pretty much perfect. Like they nail it with all the fantastical stuff towards the third act and stuff. But I do have to echo a lot of Dave's thoughts. Like for me, I'm sorry, Tom, but I do have to say that there's a little bit of criticism. I didn't feel as if the 10 Rings took away from the martial arts, as you sort of said, Dave. I felt it we were building to that. Like, it was like, okay, we need to have a battle with these rings between them. For me, what ruined it is the big dragon soul-sucking thing coming out of it. I just sort of, in the theater, I was like, okay, we're doing this now then. Do you know what I mean? Like, it like you, I didn't feel as if it was a build-up to it. There was a bit of lore dump just thrown into you, but I can forgive that because I'll listen to Michelle Yeoh telling any story. But I did feel as if the family connection is what lost it towards the end. I felt as if it needed to conclude between Shang-Chi and Wenwu. I felt as if it was all building towards that. They needed to be not necessarily a redemption story for Wenwu, but some sort of closure for him, because I didn't get the vibe to when the monster was coming out that he was like, oh, I was lied to all along. Do you know what I mean? He didn't have that epiphany or that moment. It was just sort of like, okay, the monster's here. It's got me. Here are the rings, sort of thing. So that sort of just ruined. I was just like, okay, I just wanted a bit more drama, a bit more weight to the emotional core, which is the relationship between Shang-Chi and Wenwu. But I do love cape shit. I love the dragons fighting each other. It's glorious to watch. But I felt as if I wasn't as connected to it as I would have wanted to be.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add one thing. Okay, we're gonna go really dive into this. The thing that's with Wenwu and Sean not having that closure with something a bit more dramatic, but they're doing it instead with looks. Asian people don't talk about their feelings. We don't, especially families. It's not within the culture. And actually, I think there was in the farewell, which also Aquafina was also in there. There was, if you haven't seen it, that you care about Asian representation, definitely go watch that, because there is a very interesting theme about the difference between American relationships and Chinese relationships. And the main thing is that Americans, or generally Westerners, the only thing they want to do is talk. Always want to talk about how they feel all the time. Chinese, they don't. And it's not only just in China, this goes like larger into Asia. And that communication is one of the most difficult things to do. So in the end, where there wasn't like an overly dramatic ending, or in a way, action from Wenwu to be like, saying like, oh, I'm sorry, or something like that, that actually would be a betrayal to the culture, especially someone who had lived for thousands of years within that culture. I mean, you could even say that he built his own culture within that government. I don't think we should go there. And but the look in the end, that is like pure like mean strict Chinese father giving approval. Like, that's what it is in the end. And that is something I took out of it. And yes, like my Western audience member inside me wanted to have also a conclusion, but looking back at it, I'm like, nah, this is true to what they want to show. Because to be honest, I don't think it would have made much sense for when it was suddenly to just be very open. I think just the gesture of letting go his rings, that it's enough for him, because that was like the thing seemingly he cared more about in the perspective of his children. So as that's what I want to add.
我不想惹麻烦。
那就把项链交出来。
You have the wrong guy. Does he look like he can fight? Come on, bro.
You okay?
What up, y'all? It's your boy Clev coming at you live on the bus. I actually did take a little bit of martial arts as a youth, so I'm going to try and grade this fight as we're going.
Let's move on to the cast and the performances. Obviously, we're going to start with the number one on the call sheet, Simu Liu, playing Shang-Chi. I mean, in general, like I think the whole cast, you mentioned, Dave, you believe this is one of your favorite ensemble MCU casts. I've got to agree with you. It's definitely up there, along with I would say Doctor Strange and Black Panther have got a fantastic ensemble cast. But it's so like you've got all these young upcoming talents like Simu Liu, Awkwafina, and then you've also got these incredible established veterans like Tony Leung, Michelle Yeoh. Everyone's bringing their A game, and they're all bringing it a modern feel. But like I said, still, as I mentioned up top, are still respect. And deep appreciation of what's come before. And starting with, Simu Liu, I just think he brings, what's the right word for it? Like an everyman quality to his portrayal. I didn't feel at any point like he was like this big, buffling, like Thor type superhero. He just felt like a guy with just family issues, that we all go through. He's just, he's noble, he's respectful. I love that moment, as you mentioned, Dave, between him and his sister at the end. He's loving, he's funny. I love the chemistry he's got with Awkwafina. As you mentioned again, Dave, I love that they didn't take that in a romantic direction. And even with all the chaos going around him with his father and then the dragons at the end and all this lore, he still finds like the moments to show these like his natural ability to care for others. Like he's always like whether he's throwing like verbal jabs or punching people, like he's just a natural and he's just so charismatic, and I think he's definitely going to be leading this franchise in the future, and I can only think he's going to get better. But Steph, how about you? What did you think of the lead, Simu Liu?
Okay, I do love the guy, but that's because I used to love the Canadian show he was, Kim's Convenience, which is like it's a Canadian / Korean sitcom. And the funny thing, the whole process of him making suggestions on Twitter, and then afterwards, like a couple years later, he got the cast. I was within that journey. So obviously for me, my feelings for him are positive, but because of, you could say, the journey in a way. But yeah, no, like I more or less the same. I think the big thing about him is the fact that he feels like an everyman. I mean, yeah, sure, like really, really fit. But to be fair, it's not like you don't see a lot of fit people around. And that's how it felt. It felt approachable. It's not like Chris Hemsworth with those fucking guns of arms, which I'm like, how is that even possible? How do you go to sleep? And that's how I felt with him. And yeah, like more or less how we all said, like you like about the character himself, and he really embodied all that. And one of the main factors I think the character works because of him and how charismatic and so likable And even when it comes to the point where he actually confesses that he did kill someone, it's the same disbelief as Katie, because you're seeing this guy like being such a likable and pure presence, and the fact that he did something like that, and the fact that he feels the way he feels, makes him more. Surprisingly, it makes him more of a lead, if you know what I mean, like an actual lead. Like you're rooting for him, you feel for him, and you see all the journey. And yes, the flashbacks really helped with that. And I usually hate flashbacks in films, but yeah, that definitely did for me. And also want to give a huge shout out the fact that Sean and Katie is an actual platonic friendship of opposite sexes, which I oh God, I think that was another moment that I wanted to scream out loud. Oh, thank God, because I am so tired of the typical trope of the lead and the female love interest. Because you can't have female friends for some reason, and these for me, because they have such good chemistry, it made it feel so real. Like the whole thing is like everyone like went on a night out. It's like, oh yeah, we should go home and like we have work tomorrow. I'm like, no. Or and they go get wasted. I'm like, yeah, that is real. That feels so much real. Then all of a sudden, yeah, wanna fuck? No, that's not how it works.
Tom, so on the sort of friendship as well, what did you think of the lead and Aquafina in their roles?
I loved both of them. Simu Liu as Shang-Chi, absolutely loved him. He clearly brought his A game to it. I mean, just reading all the shit he learned for it. So he was already knowledgeable in Taekwondo and Wing Chun, but he also learned Tai Chi, Wushu, Muay Thai, Krav Maga, Jiu Jitsu, and street fighting for the film. So, like, I mean, looking through, all the cast list did pretty much the same. They just went, right, I'm just going to learn a bunch more new techniques for this. And just, I love that commitment. But yeah, I thought he played Shang-Chi like in a great way. Like Steph said, like he just seemed like very approachable. Like he seems like the kind of guy you'd want to have a pint with. You know, just like, I don't know. I just kind of want to hug him as well. He just seems so huggable. Like, Aquafina as Katie was also fantastic. I hadn't seen much of Aquafina before this film, so I wasn't really sure what to expect from her, but I absolutely adored her. She's got one of the most like contagious smiles as well. I found like just whenever she's smiling, I'm just like, oh, this is great. This is great. And I thought their chemistry was absolutely amazing as well. I'm kind of also glad that they did keep it platonic with this film. I am not opposed to them maybe later on down the line if it is like done organically. I'm not opposed to them getting into a relationship, but also I feel like it's not necessary, it's not required. They bounce off each other really well as it is. So, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So yeah, for me, Aquafina was a revelation, if anything, because like I said, I just wasn't sure what to expect from her, and I found myself at the end like going, I kind of want to see her in more things now, and I definitely want to see her in more Shang-Chi. And as the guy said, like just randomly in the Avengers film, just going, "You got this, bro," and then him getting like pounded by like Red Hulk or something, and he's just like, "I'm fine." Yeah, so I absolutely loved them. I think, yes, Simu Liu is just, he's just so lovable. I just love him. I love him to bits, and I hope he stays in the MCU forever and becomes the next leader of the Avengers.
Dave, what did you think of the two leads? And then we'll get into our daddy Wenwu.
Yeah, like you guys, I think the Simu Liu has got so much charisma. He, like you said, Steph, as well, he just seemed like such an ordinary guy, and I loved that you're kind of able to go on this journey with him. While I don't think he's exactly the type of character or actor, but I don't think we've really had that with many MCU characters, apart from maybe Robert Downey Jr., in which you can sort of like feel you're like on the journey with them, but he kind of like works in the way that he's like almost like your Katie, in the way that he's like, I'm telling you how to say my name, and like, this is how this works, this is how this works. He, you know, he's so funny just genuinely in person anyway. And a lot of the stuff he's been doing promotion wise, like there was this company which like made all like the signage and stuff in like New York City in Times Square, and he like took a video with it, and he was like, oh, how awesome is this? And it's kind of like that Richard E. Grant element of like you love like going on that journey and seeing them being excited about, you know, what they're doing. So that has just been a joy, and I think that comes through in his performance, is that ability, as Tom said, that he's like learnt all this stuff and he's able to show you that and show you how dedicated he is, and show you just what like a natural sort of charismatic actor he is, who's able to sort of like break things down to you and sort of like not come across as like forced. It just seemed a very natural performance, which I thought was fantastic. And he has great chemistry with Awkwafina. She was definitely one of my favorite aspects of this film. I think that one of my favorite jokes in the film was like when the bus scene happened at the end, and she's just like, we made a great team, because the trailer made us think that she was talking to Shang in that moment, but the fact that she was talking to like the garbage truck that had to like rub against the bus to go down to the bottom, I just thought that was fantastic. And like Tom said, her smile is like makes that work, that she's just like, we made a great team, that we had to like crash two vehicles together. One of them had no say in the matter. I just love that. And so I don't know how much she added to this. I know in like previous projects, you know, she can kind of do a lot of like ad-libbing and sort of like more sort of improvised work, etc., or whether they just kind of like wrote the script with her in mind so much that it worked very well in that sense, or she just elevated the material that much. And I felt that this was very much, I don't know if you agree, Steph, like a big part of like Asian, Chinese culture, etc., of like, you know, going out with your friends and, you know, like having that like gossip and like the two couples, etc., even though obviously they're not like a romantic couple. So to like bridge the film in that way, I thought was like a fantastic touch as well, of having them tell that story. And again, they couldn't have pulled that off if it wasn't for Simu Liu and Awkwafina both being there, the way they're telling the story, being like, and then this dragon comes out and like it like sucks in his soul, and we're having to like, they played that so well, and you could tell that just like the vibe on set that day must have been fantastic. So big Awkwafina fan. I thought she did absolutely spectacular in this. And Simu Liu, you know, fantastic guy. Can't wait to see more of them. Thought they did excellent.
All right. So we've talked about the fresh new talent coming in. Let's talk about some of the veterans in this. And obviously we have to start with Tony Leung now. But I love that he, in his role of Wenwu, like he brings a mixture of like tough love and confidence to him, like with especially in like the flashback scenes when Shang-Chi's younger. But he also keeps on providing, you know, chilling reminders of how deadly and remorseless this guy can be. Like, he was chilling to the bone. And I loved how they kept on using Katie as, like, the audience perspective, because I felt what she felt when I'm paraphrasing, but she was like, we've seen a lot of crazy stuff in the last few days, but your dad is another level. Like, because that is what I felt. Like, the guy was absolutely terrifying. Like, I think he's the scene stealer for most of the film. Like, he's such a well-layered villain. Like you feel bad for him, but then you have to quickly remind yourself, wait, he's the bad guy to the point where he's like almost the main as main driving force as Shang-Chi within the film. Like, I think like there's a lot of different types of acting going on here, and you know, I think Steph, you mentioned this in a podcast previously that. When we were discussing those scenes, that a lot of Hong Kong cinema, especially Jackie Chan, it's very physical acting, it's very expressionistic, and I thought the physical acting within this was insane, because like the flashback where we see like the Tony Leung and I can't remember her, Jai Li is Shang-Chi's mother, when they first meet in the bamboo forest. Like, I love that because very little dialogue is happening. Like, the camera's swirling around them as they tussle. The leaves are flying everywhere. Visual storytelling at its absolute finest. And it's all within the acting of those two actors there. And, it's just insane. I could keep on going on and on about Tony Leung in this. I think he's great. But, Steph, I know you're also a big fan of Tony Leung. What did you think of him as the villain in this?
Like, Tony Leung, for me, it's like... how can I say it? It's a thing like for how some people in America and here in the UK see someone like Danny Day-Lewis or Who's another huge acclaimed actor that
Michael
everyone
Caine.
loves? Michael Caine. Oh, yeah, that's actually a good shout. Because Tony Long, well, he's actually a Hong Kong legend, and the weird thing is, with this film, is the fact that Tony Long is he's not famous for playing villains. He's actually famous for playing usually the good guys, always, albeit always complex, always with a lot of different baggage and layers that in some cases they could even be called as not the most righteous character, but definitely not the villain in his films. And so when they announced it, then announced the film that and Tony Long was going to be what at that time he was going to be a version of the Mandarin, I was immediately sold because this was something I never thought he would be part of. And yeah, so the fact that it also was his first, not only Hollywood film, but also first Western film. And this is also, I think, the most yet ever spoken English to for that long in a film. For me, when the first time he spoke English, I was not put off. I was just, full whiplash. I was like, whoa, Tony Long speaks English. I don't know how to feel about that. But overall, though, God, that opening. Because, like you said, that the opening fight for me, I'm gonna go far more details afterwards. But yes, that is my favorite fight because it's the one. One of the main factors of it is literally just looks. And the thing is, Tony Long. Oh God, the looks he gives to so many films. It just makes people melt, and specifically films like In the Mood for Love, which literally the film doesn't have a lot of dialogue. It literally is about a woman and a man looking at each other intensely, obviously want to fuck, but they don't fuck, but they definitely are fucking each other. So the whole dance, 100% that, and that was what I knew. I knew that was like this is gonna be something special because even as a villain, I don't think we've had that kind of introduction before. Because the way they played it out, it wasn't played as the great threat. It was played almost like a tragedy, a fairy tale, saying like the whole the mythical and mystical element of this character, all the decades and centuries living and conquering. And the only time we see a bit of humanity is seeing this one person who was the only one who could beat him. And I'm like, and I felt it. And then as the film progressed, the fact that I was starting seeing the perspective from Sean and starting having the more violent sides. But I think that's something I really like how they played out the story about Woods. The fact that each time we see a different perspective, we get a different person, but not necessarily in the fact that it feels out of character, but it just feels like we're starting seeing layers. The fact that there is an MCU film that made me think so hard to the antagonist, it's a huge credit to the whole team. And if we start calling him a villain, maybe he's my favorite villain, but I don't necessarily like the term. But he's definitely one of my favorite characters, or my favorite character as an antagonist.
I would say antagonist is probably more the fitting name rather than a straight up villain. Guys, Tom, Dave, I'll go to you first, Dave. What did you think of Wenwu's portrayal, and then also the other veteran that joined the cast, Michelle Yeoh?
Yeah, I think especially when you compare Tony Leung to somebody like Guy Pearce as Killian in Iron Man 3, like complete contrast as well. And just, they're like, I am the Mandarin. And then he's just there like, no, I'm just very chilled out. I'm just going to be sat here at the table and sort of mock that name. So I felt, for me, like I didn't sort of come away like, oh, wow, or, amazing. But I think that's the point, is that you've got actors like Glenn Close and Annette Bening, all these like big, top tier sort of like Hollywood names who've, you know, come along in the MCU over the years, and it just kind of felt like he was sort of adding to that. It's got very much like a Robert Redford's kind of like, again, like this legacy actor who kind of like plays it cool, is not like overly villainous, you know, hasn't got like a huge, like, again, it's not like Hela or anything. They're not like stealing the scenery or anything like that, but it's a very like natural, nuanced performance, I felt. And yeah, I thought he did a great job. I think that like he had that scene where like the water came out and everything, and he was convincing his children. I thought all of that was really great. I think, again, unfortunately, he just like gets mixed up a bit in the whole like villain story aspect of like not knowing whether he's being controlled and everything like that. But all the stuff that we had, I agree with Steph. I don't see him as like a straight up villain. I see a kind of like Killmonger, etc., in which he's, you know, this character who's maybe well intentioned but just going about it in the wrong way. And I think that he does just come across as this kind of like head of this organization, not necessarily like an evil dictator, just this guy who's just like, you know, like a mafia boss kind of thing, who's, again, doing good, bad stuff. He's just somebody who knows his shit and knows how to control stuff, and that comes across. So I think he did great. Michelle Yeoh, she always like brings it. Like, she's just such a great, you know, actress. I love seeing her in anything. When she turns up, you know, it's very much, you're like, oh, you know, yay, this is like the moment that she comes into it. Especially interested because everyone sort of thought that she might be Shang-Chi's mum. So quite funny to me when she does come in and is like, I am your auntie. And you're like, oh, we're going down that route of like Hollywood, in which like, how can we get Michelle Yeoh in this? It's just like, she's their auntie? Like, okay, you know. But so I think that obviously she does all that, like, you know, the story, everything very well. She sort of bridges that, you know, the worlds quite well. And yeah, again, I would be happy to see her turn up again. I think that she's kind of like maybe a good parallel to someone like the Ancient One, in which we've seen Tilda Swinton sort of come back and being this like kind of like narrator, mystic character. I think she could like serve a role like that. So yeah, they both did fantastic jobs.
Tom, I'll go to you. What did you think of the veterans in this film?
Oh, they were just so good. I mean, yeah, it's always a joy seeing Michelle Yeoh in anything, and it was a joy seeing her in this. And I loved all the scenes between her and Shang-Chi and her and Zhang Ling, and just her and anyone, to be honest, because she's just a marvel. Tony Leung as Wenwu was, what can you say? He was absolutely outstanding. I agree with you guys. It's a bit, I feel it would be a bit unfair to just call him a straight up villain. And I think, yeah, antagonist is definitely a better fit for it. But just what a complex character, and what a great actor to play him. I absolutely loved it. And like I was maybe a bit gutted that he did die in the end, but that doesn't mean we can't see him again through the medium of flashbacks or, you know, kung fu mystic crap that they got going on. They could do something. So yeah, I loved both of them. I thought they were absolutely outstanding. And yeah, I definitely want to see Michelle Yeoh in more. I feel like I have to give a good shout out to the other veteran actors on there. Ben Kingsley, who played the amazing Trip.
Let's talk about it then.
Right. So before we get into it, so I'm going to give him props because he is an amazing veteran actor who, like I said, I ended up laughing at pretty much all of his lines. So like I kind of hated the character that much in the film. But also extra special, amazing shout out to the amazing, incomparable D. Bradley Baker who played Morris. But yes, so Travis Slattery, what did we all think of him?
Okay, I think I'm gonna be both critical but also nice about it. I knew that he was gonna be in it. I didn't expect him to be actually in it, like actually be part of it. He was part of the group. I literally was actually, okay, when he literally was walking with them and being in the car, I literally said out loud, oh, is he going to be part of the group now? Is he actually part of the film? I thought it was going to be just one scene where maybe he gets killed. Or just, you know, a fun thing. You're saying, you know, the fake Mandarin, he's in there. Like, no, he's at work. And I'm like, I was so mind blown. it's insane. This is like equivalent to Nick Fury at the end of Iron Man. Like this is like for me was like so insane. Like which funny enough is still isn't a majority Asian cast because he is half Asian, so it's like he kind of fits. But yeah, okay. I will say that the comedic bits themselves are funny, like for sure. Like themselves, the jokes are really good. I just felt they were a bit jarring in this film, like especially what the fuck is going on, and suddenly we just cut to Trevor playing dead, and I'm like, I mean, it's funny and it's cute because of Morris, but come on, like guys, soul eating demon, killing people, come on, priorities. Uh, but yeah, but still it is a good performance though. Like, I'll give Ben Kingsley like fucking props. Like he went 1000% in the whole thing, and yeah, it worked because of him. But still, I do feel like it was because my main issue is the second act in general, and when he appears, it does not really help. and for me, but to be fair, I had a really good time because I think also the theater experience of packed with the room really assisted to me at least appreciate it or just have fun with it because everybody was just laughing, and you know what, fair, and the fact that I do find it funny and not annoying, fair. I mean, that's a credit. Would I feel better if he wasn't in it at all? Yes, most likely. But do I hate it? No, because to be honest, it's a huge improvement from Iron Man 3. So, definitely a thumbs up, but with caution.
Yeah, I'm also kind of 50-50 about it, but at the end of the day, again, if we kind of rewind through my history in this podcast, it's kind of dumb, stupid shit, which is also my jam. And if we think back to like when we're talking about comic book movies that are rotten, that we appreciate, I give credit and say that this dumb Elton John joke in Kingsman: The Golden Circle saved that film for me. So if I can give credit to that, I can give credit to this. And again, I think it is because Trevor Slattery, in the way he's played by Ben Kingsley, he does this so well. And I think it's just, if that was anybody else, if that was sorry to mention this, but if that was James Corden, I would be like leaving that cinema and I would be done for the rest of Marvel's days. But Ben Kingsley plays it so well. He really like embraces it. But what I also think is quite ironic and funny about this is that Everett Ross, as played by Martin Freeman in Black Panther, ends up becoming the token white guy in that film, which is like really refreshing. And that kind of happens with Ben Kingsley in this film, is that like the dumb, stupid, like butt of jokes becomes the token white guy, which is like, that's quite funny because you're it's as if we are like mocking ourselves almost there, that we're like, yeah, and let's make all the characters of who are Asian and different diversities, the better, more representative, capable characters. Will make this guy like the sort of like weirdo.
I will say though, if Disney haven't already got these in production, they need to be making plushes of Morris, because if they're going to sell out if they make those. Right. Yes. So last thing on the characters. Any other characters we want to shout out? I mean, there's such a stacked cast. Like, there's just so many characters. I do want to shout out very quickly to, I think you pronounce her name, Meng'er Zhang, who plays Shang-Chi's sister, Xialing, because I wish we had more time, because I absolutely loved her. Arguably, she's probably one of my favorite characters from the film. I looked her up on like IMDb and Letterboxd. There's nothing. Like, there's no recorded work that she's done before. So I have nothing.
This is her first job. Yeah, a lot of people said this is her first role.
I know,
which is
and
insane.
she absolutely kills it. And there's a couple of scenes that she's having a really intimate moment with Shang-Chi, and I think she kind of outacts him a little bit at times. Like so much nuance and depth and gravitas to her. She's absolutely amazing. And obviously all the fight scenes with what's that weapon called, that the rope dart thing,
the rope dart.
incredible. The moves she's doing, and again, like Michelle Yeoh, you can see she's doing it. She's doing those moves and stuff like that. So yeah, shout out to her. And finally, I will say, Wong is slowly becoming my favorite character in the MCU.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna talk about Wong when we talk about the post-credit stuff, because I'm there.
Also, the one thing I want to add with Jay Ling is what Tom said earlier, which is just like Tekken character, like full on, like that is like some badass like female character from a game, fighting game. Like she just killed it.
I should also probably mention that my name's not technically Sean.
What is it?
It's Shang-Chi.
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 Shang.
Shan.
Shang.
Shan.
S-H-A-N-G. Shang.
Shang.
Yeah.
You changed your name from Shang to Sean?
Yeah, I don't...
I wonder how your father found you.
I was 15 years old, all right?
What is your name change logic? You going into hiding and your name is Michael, you go on change it to Michael.
Right, so let's talk about everything else we basically loved about the film. I mean, we've sort of talked about it here and there, but I think we have to give a special focus to the action. Obviously, this is a martial arts film. Like, this is, I think, where the film ultimately shines. For me anyway, like being a huge martial art fan. And it's really refreshing to see in Hollywood, Western cinema, martial arts, kung fu, jiu-jitsu, all of this being actually being used in a genuine way. And it's and I love that with this film, it's attracting a whole new generation of audiences and cinemas and kids. And I'm hoping this is like the new wave of martial arts. It will introduce them to this. A lot of the fights I found were really inspired by Jackie Chan, because the fight coordinator of the film was Andy Cheng, who has worked a lot with Jackie Chan. And he previously worked with Jackie as his stunt double on the Rush Hour trilogy. So I think that's some of the latest work he's done with him. So really, really good stuff here. And but this, even though it's homaging a lot of like the Jackie Chan stuff, especially like on the bus with his jacket, doing all those flips. I remember seeing Jackie Chan doing a lot of those moves. It still manages in a way to be respectful and homaging all those movies that came before it, but it's doing it in new and interesting, different ways for a new audience with that MCU flavor, which is really cool. But and yeah, as I said, the scaffolding scene, it's just insane because there's so much going on. There's so much happening in this fight sequence as it's spanning multiple levels, both inside and out. So, they're moving throughout the corridor. So good. I just loved every moment of that action sequence. But Tom, I'll go to you. The action sequences. I'm sure we were been speaking about for ages now. That's what we've been looking forward to. Were you satisfied?
I was very, very satisfied with them. I mean, you've named the two of the best ones already. The bus fight scene was incredible. Obviously, we'd seen it in a clip beforehand, but we got to see like it in all its IMAX glory, and I absolutely just loved it. I even loved the comedy in it. Like I remember when we were discussing like maybe some of the comedy in the clip didn't seem to, it seemed a bit jarring, but I actually found it in the context of the scene, it's really, really funny. And yeah, that the scaffolding scene was just incredible from start to finish. I mean, the bit where I think it's Awkwafina's character is like on that pole that's like falling, and Shang is just, as soon as he sees it, he just pile drives through fucking everyone, just like punching through. He's got a one-track mind. He doesn't care about anything else. He's like, I need to save my friend before she fucking dies. And just the way it was shot in that sequence as well, there was another great shot, I think, in one of the fight scenes when they were like in cars, and it was one where like it seems like to start the shot was inside the car, and then as Young Lane like kind of moved outside, the camera came out of the car and like showcased her from there, and I was just like, that was really, really well done. I know there's been some slightly negative things of the like last fight scene with the rings and that. Personally, I'm all about that shit, because like whilst they were fighting with the rings, they were still keeping the various like moves in the various styles of fighting they were using, and it gave me a lot of vibes of kind of Avatar: The Last Airbender, where it's like they're not actually doing, you know, fist to fist like fighting, but they are still doing the various, you know, we'll call it kung fu moves or taekwondo moves or tai chi moves or whatever, but it's just all that magic and powers happening behind that. So yeah, I thought it was all done beautifully. I thought that final fight scene with all the dragons and just going all around each other, and Shang-Chi doing that amazing shit and blowing up the dragon, I thought it just looked great. Part of me was there thinking, like, is he gonna do like some form of like the Kamehameha? Like, just like I thought he was like building up for some big energy blast rather than like, oh, the rings are inside the Soul Dweller and he's just doing his shit there. So I was just like, are we getting like the Spirit Bomb? Just like, lend me your energy tablet. My hands out to give him his energy. It was just great, brilliant looking film, brilliant action, and I kind of hope they keep the aesthetic going forward through the rest of the Shang-Chi films. Don't, you know, play about with it, but don't change it too much, just because it just looked so beautiful.
Dave, what did you think of the action and any other technical aspects of this film?
Well, I do want to quickly mention the score as well. Like, that was also fantastic, because, you know, shame on Hollywood for, obviously we've got some great like sort of like Oriental Chinese music and stuff from the films in which they originate, and, you know, a few like kind of like amalgamations in the past. But in many ways, Kung Fu Panda for quite a lot of years was like the only one which like really went in on the like, yeah, you know, like awesome Kung Fu, like Asian style music with all the instrumentation. So now thankfully we've got Shang-Chi with also this like epic sort of like Chinese instrumentation, etc. So that was great, and it worked really well in that action moment you were just talking about, in which he had the Kamehameha moment of so using the rings inside the Soul Dweller, and that just in itself was just such a beautiful, like awesome looking moment. And you know, you have these moments within film and different fantasy superhero stories, and I thought that that was really one of them. That worked so well, of when he was above that creature and you just had like, it looked like a painting or something of just him doing that like pose. And I said to Tom afterwards as well, I thought he was just going to go for like the biggest flying kick ever. I thought he was just going to like kick like all the way down. But again, I was just glad that they went with like, oh, you know, we're showing like he has some form of power. How is he using it, etc. So I was really glad to see that. And it was just such an empowering moment. The music really like swelled up at that moment. Quick mentions of like favorite action moments, like Tom with the scaffolding thing. That was just pure, like so much tension in that scene, the way he's like flipping between them. And again, I bought that was Simu Liu. I was like, wow, is he actually like, you know, monkey barring between all of these posts, etc. Like, that was impressive. And just the way that it was like working between the different levels was great. And the scene on the bus where it was like just going to the side, so the shot in which it was just like panning throughout the entire bus and it was just showing the side and he's just plowing through all those guys, that just looked visually amazing. I loved that. Obviously the entire bus sequence was great, but just that moment in which they went like, right, we're just gonna like pan across this bus and show him like doing these awesome moves, that just looked so cool. So yeah, great action, great, you know, choreography, stunt work was amazing. And yeah, just like, obviously the VFX maybe gets a bit much towards the end with like the soul creature and stuff. I thought that the guardian creature looked amazing, looked great, like you could see the hairs and everything on it. And I think it really, one thing I want to mention is testament to the world we live in. I don't think we ever could have got this film years ago. What Game of Thrones has done, they're like, before it used to be like, oh, dragons are like uncool, they're like this, you know, silly little nerdy thing, Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing. Whereas now they're like, yeah, Marvel film, dragons everywhere. And I think that's what makes this film really set apart. And I had to like come out of it and go like, wow, kudos to that, respect to that, because as much as Marvel has done, all the things they've done, we've never had something as batshit, or should I say dragon shit crazy as that, of just having full on, Lord of the Rings kind of like, dragons flying around. Just this like evil, I don't know what, like chimera looking kind of thing at the end, which was just like, what is going on here? What am I watching? This is a Marvel film. This is bonkers. So on the level that Tom enjoys it for that kind of cape shit and how crazy it is, I do agree with him. Maybe CG wise, they didn't have like the most like amazing or original design, but I kind of had to just respect the balls that they had to do it. So yeah, kudos to that, even though sometimes it just gets a bit too overly CGI, just full on effects all the time. They could have just balanced it a bit more with some of the martial arts and some physical aspects, I thought.
I think the one thing I want to add about the fighting, because more or less I agree with all of you, but I think the other aspect that I loved the fighting is the fact that each person who fought with their own techniques was part of their own personality. And like I said, well, that's why my favorite fight is the opening with Wenwu and Lee, because you can tell a lot about each other from just the way they fight. The Wenwu being full wushu and Lee being Tai Chi, and then the amalgamation of what you would have expected from a martial arts action film to a wuxia film, and just this combination of the both. And then later on with Sean, basically kind of being a combination of both in the end. But I really liked his fighting up to that point, because even though it was wushu because he was trained by his father, he had his own quality, including the physical humor. Like his whole fight scene on the bus, the small moments of having this, that the use of the jackets, which normally we see someone like Jackie Chan do, which is like pure physical comedy in the most impressive fighting way. That is something that really took out of me. But as for the other aspects, yes, I do agree that the cinematography is really good. But there was sometimes I felt there was like an unbalance to some of the tones. Like, yes, there was some of the very warm aesthetics, but then there were some of the very cold ones, and the cold ones were the ones that I felt the less inspired and the less effective. Even though I love how the whole thing looked when they were in San Francisco and in Macau, I think once again, the first act, so fucking good. And the cinematography was, I think that was its peak. But I do believe like one of the factors that didn't really help in the end, it was the CGI. And not necessarily the CGI itself, I think the incorporations of CGI and live action people. I think that is for me where it kind of started losing it a bit, like bits of the quality we were getting up to that point. Which again, I don't hate it. It's not something like the end of Black Panther, which was so noticeable. But I would lie if I said that I would have preferred to have had just a physical fight than two CGI creatures eating each other. But it is pretty though. Like the final, the shots of the creature exploding and all of that, of how all the water was surrounding it. Yeah, fucking gorgeous. But I didn't. It wasn't as effective if I had like an actual fight-to-fight moment. But again, I think that's a very minor issue, because in the end, like you all said, the whole point was for Sean to really become himself, to become Shang-Chi, and being both the father, the son of his father, of his mother, but most importantly to be himself.
Okay, let's get you ready to fight.
Wait, what?
We're a multi-platform global operation. Every fight, live stream on the dark web. Thousands of viewers placing bets as we speak. This is gonna take your brand to a whole new level.
I think there's been some sort of confusion.
I like your spike face.
Usually, you gotta fight your way to Central Ring. But a viral star like you, front of the line, baby.
I'm not here to fight anybody. Okay, I'm looking for my sister, Shishale.
Never heard of her. We just lost a fighter at the last minute, so you get the next slot.
Right, so let's go into the final bit of the review then, which is going forward in the MCU and specifically talking about those 2 post-credit scenes. Well, we had a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. So let's talk about the mid one first. So basically, you know, continuing where the last scene of the film basically ended off, of Shang-Chi and Katie being greeted by Wong in the pub and saying, hey, you got to come with me. Your lives are about to change. So here we see them analyzing the rings, and there we see some holograms of Bruce Banner and Captain Marvel giving their input on the rings. We find out that, you know, he's Wenwu's had them for 1,000 years, but this is much older than 1,000 years, and there's a little beacon in there that's calling out to something. So, Tom, I'll go to you first as a comic book shogun. Do you have any theories of the legacy of these rings, considering they're saying that it's much older than 1,000 years? Who are they calling out to? What is that beacon? And was it a pleasant surprise to see Bruce Banner and Carol Danvers?
It was a lovely surprise to see them, especially a surprise seeing Bruce Banner as he was, because I was expecting him to be big and green, and yet he is not. He is white and lean instead. So kind of want to see what happens there. Maybe that'll tie into the whole She-Hulk of it all. I feel they were, you know, definitely teasing something with that, because everyone is asking the same question: why is he not green? Seeing Carol there was great as well. I love that they are just going in on, yep, she's an Avenger now, even if she is busy shooting off doing her own thing, and it's okay. We've all got her number. We don't have her number. As for what it's setting up in the future. See, I liked your theory, Jake, when you were saying it could tie into the Eternals, and I think maybe it is. I think maybe, like, as Marvel fans, we're too used to, like, these end credit scenes, like maybe because we're at the start of Phase 4, we're still thinking these end credit scenes are just going to be setting up something bigger, when in actual fact it could just be linking into the Eternals to build up hype for that, and maybe during the Eternals they'll have a scene where they create the rings and maybe bury them somewhere. Or something. So it could be a beacon calling out to the Celestials, maybe. The other theory I've got is something to do with Galactus, because beacon calling out to parts unknown, thousands of years old potentially. You could I'm not saying that there is like a famous link between the rings and Galactus in the comics, but this is the MCU. You could very easily and convincingly write it in that the rings are somehow connected to Galactus in some way. I could think of 1,000 ways you could make that work. But I think the other thing is they've kept it deliberately vague, because in my mind, I can't think of any examples of like stuff in the comics that the rings could be calling out to. I mean, I'm sure Carol says that she doesn't even recognize the materials from anywhere in the universe. So that opens up an even wider range of possibilities there. Could it be calling to Kang somehow? Could Kang have created these rings for some reason? Could it be calling out to an alternate version of Thanos from another universe? Could it be calling to Adam Warlock? Could it be calling to Annihilus in the negative zone? Possibilities are endless, and I think at this point in time, any guesses we have are just going to be that, pure guesses. There is simply not enough information within this clip to definitely say one way or the other who the hell that beacon is contacting. But I would put my favorites as it's just a link to the Eternals and the Celestials, or it's something to do with Galactus, or possibly Kang. Those would be my 3 favorites. But as for what the scene is like its main purpose is, which is to set up Shang-Chi as an Avenger, and an important one going forward, it does its job. And then, of course, we have the great karaoke scene of Wong, Casey, and Shang singing Hotel California, and it was beautiful. So yeah, those are my views on it.
Yeah, it's we don't know anything for sure, but my God, is it fun to speculate. Steph, where's your head at on this then?
I'm not gonna lie, I don't care. Like, I think I've come to the point that I don't want to think about it. I think I'm just gonna enjoy this as it is. Yeah, cool. It's setting up something big. Obviously, like, it's the MCU. They always set up something big. So, and to be honest, I think after WandaVision ends, even now with the No Way Home trailer, the insanity of theories that come out now, I think I've come to the point which I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna chill. I'm not gonna put too much thought of it. But yeah, I do think it could be Galactus. Although the main reason why I don't think it could be like directly connected or setting up Eternals, because Eternals was supposed to be out first. So if there was going to be any connection, then it should have been the other way around.
But Dave, what do you make of this scene then?
Yeah, there's so much to break down, isn't it? I think also, like Steph, I think that a part of me, when I saw it, I was like, okay, it's hard to know where to go with this. There's so many avenues, and it's not even like we're on a clear trajectory anymore. It's not like before, like, oh, it's going to be something to do with the Infinity Stones. And even back then, we saw Thanos, and, you know, people probably had a pretty solid idea of where it was leading to. But you think of everything that happened in between that, and, you know, this could be the same thing. It's like, this could be something that's like years away, or it could be building up something that we won't, you know, like even start to come properly to light for a long time. So I'm not going to get too hung up on it. You know, Tom said once we had seen it, he said, oh, you could have been right, you know, in the one I said on one of our podcast episodes that the rings could be like, you know, another MacGuffin of like the Infinity Stones. They could be used in that way. And while they don't seem to be like, you know, individually powered and have that kind of like element to it, they could still be an important role and could sort of like suit that appeal of them having this kind of like treasured item. But, you know, if I'm going to throw wild card, you know, tinfoil hat theories out there, Doom, why not? Doctor Doom is, you know, there with the rings on. Seems like his kind of jam. But what I am excited about is what I've said before is I'm really glad that we finally got new Avengers. We are seeing the team almost come together. I'm glad that, you know, like Bruce is still like a big part of it, which makes a lot of sense. I did make Tom like sort of cry a bit when I went, oh my God, is there the Illuminati, when I saw Bruce? And then he was just very sad when it wasn't. But I was, you know, I was really happy to see that we're seeing the team come together now. The fact that Wong is there almost puts Strange into the mix as well. Like Tom, I think it's great that Captain Marvel is automatically a member. My one gripe with this, and you guys know that I am, I suppose, a bit more precious about the way that they handle Captain Marvel, is I am kind of sick of this whole like, oh, I'm too busy to do this kind of thing. I'm like, can we stop with this joke now? Can she like be an Avenger? Can she be in the moment? Can she be there? You know, at Endgame, she just shows up at the end like, oh, and you know, she has to go from the hologram message with Black Widow, and I'm like, can she actually be there?
It's the Superman effect, though, isn't it? Because you have such an OP character that having her in most situations, she could wrap up very easily.
I just think that it's not so much an action power thing. I just think that I just would like her to be more like involved in the storylines and like the decisions that they're doing. If they want to do a whole like, you know, she's trapped in a prison and she can't take part in that action scene, fine, whatever. But I just mean that she needs to be a more active member, and like Cap or someone that she's actually leading the team, or she's like engaged in it, not just always like, sorry, I can only stick around for 5 minutes. And it's like, you know, I'm just a bit sick of that joke. And again, it's not good for a female character to keep having that joke of being like, call ya, you know. I was a bit like, you know, this is, you know, I didn't like that too much. But again, I hope they get rid of that joke. And it's an element that might be a part of the Marvels, because we've already seen the Monica Rambeau potentially has an issue with her kind of like fucking off, want of a better phrase, and just like leaving them in the shit. So that might be a plot element there. So maybe that'll be the opening of the Marvels. Maybe they're on a hologram call and she get like, shouldn't you stop leaving these hologram calls all the fucking time? And that's what starts the Marvels film. It's just about her being rude. So
I like that. I'd love that.
yeah. I'll quickly just touch on the end credit. I mentioned it earlier. Fully on board with like how epic that is, and I want to see that character Xialing become a proper villain and they actually be a threat. That would be awesome to see.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with it as well. I think it just made total sense, and I love that that's where the film ended on, because you have the little taste of like, this is the bigger scope, but I like that the post-credit scene was like the 10 rings will return to Shang-Chi, and I, like you, Dave, I hope she is set up not as a villain, so very much as we've been talking about with Wenwu, more as an extremely complex antagonist. You still feel as if there's friction still between Shang-Chi and Xialing. Like, I don't feel as if their relationship at the end of the film was totally wrapped up. We spoke about the wonderful moment they had there, but I don't know, I still feel as if there is something there more to be explored, more, you know, because the fact that they went on completely different paths after they left their father, the path she's been on at the minute, just because she's, you know, had a little detour and helped out her brother and her family in this little adventure, that doesn't completely change the last however many years you've been working on your own and building your empire. So she's got a lot of depth to her, and I just want to see that in play in the Shang-Chi franchise, and maybe in the further expanded MCU. We'll see how they continue to use the 10 rings. But yeah, Steph, I go to you. Any other last thoughts on the 10 rings and Xialing?
Okay, here's a what if for you guys, and I think you guys would have loved that. What if Xialing was the power broker?
Oh my god, that makes...
Oh, damn.
Damn. Kevin Feige, I hope you're listening.
Can we go back in time? Doctor Strange.
Oh my god, that's...
Can you imagine?
That's
can you imagine?
Fucking amazing, Steph.
Can you imagine if that was the introduction of Xialing in the Captain with the Soldier? Like, yeah, Captain America with the Soldier. Like, that was the introduction. But beyond that, because, oh god, that would have been amazing. But yeah, overall, more same thing as all of you. Actually, exactly the same. I don't think I'm gonna change anything. Although it is very interesting that it says the 10 rings will return, which I thought that was fascinating to me. Not Shang-Chi and the 10 rings, but only the rings, which is fascinating that you phrase it like that. And I know there are some theories saying that maybe there will be a Disney Plus show about the 10 rings and Xialing's rise. So it sounds very interesting. Or they could be the antagonist of one of the projects that they've already announced. Seriously, like, I think that's the one thing I have a more clear idea. Not like clear, but I can see possibilities. Because, you know, the rings calling something, I'm like, that is so vague. But the 10 rings returning, now that is very specific. That is...
Ironheart, maybe?
Yeah, like something like that.
Ironheart, because the 10 Rings and the Mandarin is typically an Iron Man villain, and many people, myself included, feel a bit chagrined that we didn't get a proper Iron Man Mandarin kind of film. So
I will also say in there with Ironheart, because that's a good shout, Tom, but Armor Wars, because Tony Stark's technology is being abducted or abused or whatever. That's what we know sort of about this.
Like,
could be. Well, we know Justin Hammer's going to be in that as well, so I don't know. There's many routes they could take that. Like, we at this point we don't know much about Armor Wars other than it's happening, and we know a few people who are going to be in it. So yeah, I reckon so long as they do kind of include them within their new Iron Man mythos that they're doing around Ironheart and War Machine and that, I think it would go a long way to making Iron Man fans feel a bit better, going, okay, at least they are linking one of Tony's like most iconic villains to the characters now. But But I'd be happy for them to show up in anything, to be honest. Have them show up in like the next Captain America film and have like Val's agency versus the Ten Rings versus Captain America, and then Hydra returns in the meanwhile. It's just like a battle of the secret agencies. My God, that would be amazing.
Hey, can we get real for a second? We've been friends for 10 years. I know that you don't like to talk about your life, but a guy with a freaking machete for an arm just chopped our butts in half.
DJ Snake.
Who are you?
Let's wrap up then and go into our closing thoughts then and our plugs. So, Steph, what are your closing thoughts on Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings?
It's a very entertaining entry to the MCU, a very different one, not necessarily to the action martial arts genre, but definitely a very different one to the MCU in general. There's some great lore and world building that could really expand the future of the franchise and hopefully to actually give us more of this kind of commitments. And not necessarily saying more Asian characters, although more Asian characters wouldn't be like terrible, but I do want them to really explore beyond the boundaries of the were before. And even before, when I was saying to myself, I'm not really sure I want to see another Avengers film after this, and really falling in love with Sean and Katie, now want to have an Avengers film with those two in it.
Great stuff. Dave, how about yourself?
I think for me, I'm just really excited about having now again this other corner of the MCU. We've got the magic stuff, the space stuff, and now this is something altogether different as well, which is combining the magic and space, if you want, and the action and everything like that in a very effective way, and still makes it its own thing. And I think that was what was really clever about bringing in Wong and the magic elements into this, which maybe doesn't quite work in another MCU project. We'll have to see. But I think that I'm really excited to see that corner and still have like the Shang-Chi films be the Shang-Chi films, have a trilogy, which is like when we had Iron Man, Cap, Thor, that they are their own standalone trilogies, maybe apart from obviously Civil War. But I'm really excited for that, and for it to stand alongside all these other franchises that they're building with the Eternals and continuing with Black Panther, the Marvels, etc. So I'm really excited for that. And like Steph said before, I was kind of like, I don't know if Shang-Chi is going to be there as an Avenger, just this guy who, as I joked before, but not getting it, of being like, I do kung fu, and then you're just there with some man who can like create magic portals and all this kind of stuff. But after seeing this, I'm like, hell yeah, like this guy needs to be like front and center there, part of the team. And I'd happily see another Avengers film which is scaled back, like like maybe like the first Avengers film, in which it's just a team of 6, so that you could have like Hulk, Captain Marvel, Shang-Chi, Strange, and 2 of the characters that they're building up. Or we're going to see a lot more of Black Panther. That would be fantastic. So happy to see more of him in the Avengers, and especially the fact that one essentially goes like, you were an Avenger now. So I think that that's really exciting for the future, and I can't wait.
Nice. Tom?
All right. Well, because of connection issues, I barely heard a word of what Dave and Stefanos said, so I can't wait to listen back to their opinions in the podcast. So I will apologize if there are any repeats of opinions here. As I said, it's like now firmly one of my all-time favorite comic book movies, just because it just felt pure comic book magic. I am so glad that everyone is loving Shang-Chi now. I've always loved the character and have always never doubted that he had a great place in the Avengers. Hickman proved he was an Avenger in the comics, so I knew the films would do it justice. So seeing this character brought to life in such an amazing and authentic way, and also seeing the cultural impact of it, and seeing like so many people just gushing about this movie and being so happy that they're feeling represented in Hollywood, finally, I just love that. I absolutely adore that. I'm so happy for them. And I'm happy for me as well as a comic book fan that I get to see this amazing movie and that it's going to continue and we get more Shang-Chi. We got Shang-Chi 2 and 3 and he'll be in all the Avengers films and he'll be leading the Avengers and then eventually the MCU will be all Shang-Chi and in Kung Fu and it'll be amazing. And those are my closing thoughts. Give me more Kung Fu, but maybe not Iron Fist. I could do without Iron Fist. We don't need him anymore. We got Shang-Chi.
Yeah, like you guys, I really love this film. There's just a lot to enjoy about this film. It's epic, incredible cast. The director, again, I keep talking about it, but I think he just did a fantastic job. He really made the most out of this film. It spans, multiple continents. It's such a big film, but at the same time, it's got a small story about family, but it's told in an epic way. I just thought he did a fantastic job. Fight sequences, the score, the soundtrack, the cinematography, all of it combines to make this incredibly enjoying experience. So yeah, 2 thumbs up from me. And I also think that this character, Shang-Chi, a lot of people very soon are going to start to say this is my favorite character, especially what he's doing and what this film has done for the Asian community. So big kudos to them on that part as well. So let's get out of here then. Oof, what a review this has been. As we always end, we're going to end with our plugs and what we're getting up to. But Steph, we thank you for coming on board to review this with us and give us your insight and point of view. It's always a pleasure having you. But where can the listeners see what you're getting up to and online as well, all your plugs?
Yeah, you can find me on my Twitter account at SY Florakis, where, to be honest, at this point, I'm just retweeting all the memes about Simuliu and his previous job, and the other half is literally just, Tony Long accounts, and I'm like, it's just as a phase. That's what I said 10 years ago. And on my account, you can find my link for my letterbox, which I literally put in every film I watch in a year. I think on 351. So my goal is by the end of this month to have watched more than 365. So it'll be more than one film each day this year. I don't know why I do this, but I love it. And also, please do watch films in cinemas if you can and if it's safe for you. And Disney, I know you're listening to us. Don't you fucking dare put Eternals on Premier Access. Jesus fucking Christ. This is the proof if nobody in a comic that only like 5 people read and are still alive can make that much money. Holy shit. Don't you dare. That's me.
That's
I mean, come on. Venom has moved closer because of this, so pay attention, Marvel.
Unfortunately, yes. Tom, how about yourself, man?
Well, everyone can find me on Twitter at Comic Book Shogun, where I am now more active, probably much to Jake's chagrin, probably just going on Twitter and just going, oh, it's all Tom retweeting and liking shit. God damn it, Tom. But yeah, at Comic Book Shogun. Feel free to tell me your thoughts on Shang-Chi, if you liked it. If you didn't like it, I can tell you why you're wrong, as I so often love to do. But no one gives me the opportunity.
Nice. And yourself, Dave?
Yeah, you can catch me over on Twitter at David Oscar, OSGAR. At the moment, it's usually just reacting or pointing out stuff that I see in daily life or in film and television. Trying to restrain myself from not getting angry at people like James Corden. And yeah, just gushing over the cast of this movie, I guess, as well. If you want to see like how powerful this cast is, just look at the photos from the premiere. Like, we were talking about Benedict Wong earlier, like Simu Liu, all of these casts, they, snappy dresses as well, look absolutely killing it at that premiere. So, yeah, you can catch me on Letterboxd as well, where I put all my reviews and thoughts. And, yeah, at the moment, not too much else on in terms of projects. And, it's very hard to get, films and TV shows in at the moment because I am moving. But we have got a very busy month over on Well Good Movies because we've sort of had a big summer break. So we're coming back with a lot of stuff. We've just had our King Arthur special came out. We're talking about King Arthur films. We'll also have our 50th episode, which is coming out. And we've got two fellow podcasters on this episode, which is Stefanos and Jake, are joining us for our discussion about martial arts movies. Will I get it? We will have to see, in which we're inspired by Shang-Chi, and we're talking about like some of the films that inspired that film, I guess, and some of the big ones that we've had from the martial arts genre. So do check that out. We've also got a very fun Endgame spectacular coming up, where some previous winning teams are going to return to battle it out. So very big month for Well Good Movies, so go check that out on all podcast outlets as well.
Nice. And same goes here. You can also find me on all the socials. I'm on Twitter, talking nonsense about movies, primarily Dune, and just retweeting every single image I see come out of that movie at the minute. Also catch me on Letterboxd for all my reviews and ratings of what I'm watching at the minute. And as for the show, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook at Cowls Masks. And you could, whether you use Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever you use, subscribe or follow us on there. And if you're on Apple, leave us a rating and a review, as it all helps us go up in the rankings. We also have a busy month ahead of us. We got some news to cover. I can't wait for next week as we discuss the Matrix 4 trailer. You know it's coming. And as well, we got Venom coming up as well, I guess. So we'll be reviewing that on the show very soon, to Dave's dismay, as he on his face right there. Thank you for listening. We'll see you all next week. Stay safe, everybody. And Dave finally got it!